All right, folks, it's that time. Ohio State Buckeyes Live, another Wednesday, another 1:30 start. We are here each and every week for you, so please leave those comments and questions right there in the live chat, and we will get to them. Plenty to talk about concerning Gene Smith's comments today and otherwise with From the Top, Kevin Noon, Buckeye Scoop, Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports, Tony Gerdeman, Buckeye Scoop. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing good.
Well, you just heard from Gene Smith. Of course, you're doing great. Tony, the first thing that caught my eye was actually a tweet and a back and forth that you had with several people concerning the alliance. And of course, the alliance is some kind of, I don't know that we can really get a handle on this thing of exactly what it is. It seems kind of mystic entity, but the alliance concerning scheduling, it was my thought and actual hope that the alliance would become something tangible, and that tangible quality would most likely reflect itself in the schedule, but that may not necessarily be the case.
Yeah, Mark, if it was ever going to be tangible, there would have needed to be contracts rather than just verbal agreements. And so, yes, Gene Smith talking today asked about that, and basically not everybody in the Big Ten, but the majority of the Big Ten is in favor of keeping the 9 games and keeping 9 conference games. And if you're going to keep 9 conference games, you're probably not going to then invoke another game against the Pac-12 or the ACC every year for everybody. So he didn't say it was dead, but they're not talking about it anymore in terms of the scheduling. Now what the alliance is just like-minded individuals, universities hanging out and but I do think that, and I saw all of the tweets after I tweeted that where people saying, what was your favorite alliance memory and this and that. I think what the alliance did is it slowed down the playoffs, and it took ESPN back a little bit in terms of the playoff expansion and all of that. It slowed things down, and it said, hey, we're not going to give up our power to the SEC just yet. But in terms of the scheduling, yeah, that's all done. And one of the interesting and Gene Smith said a bunch of interesting stuff. He also said that the Big Ten provides more value in this agreement to the Pac-12 or the ACC than either of the conferences provide to the Big Ten, which is exactly correct. So at that point, you're like, well, what are we getting out of this? And if TV is perfectly okay having the Big Ten just play the Big Ten, why do you need to bring in Washington State or Duke to the equation? And you just keep it with the Big Ten. And so that sure looks like that's what it's going to be, especially with the Big Ten TV deal coming. I'm guessing if the television partners were like, yeah, we'd like to see more of this alliance, then maybe it would have been more aggressive. And then, but you probably got the feedback like, yeah, we don't really need the ACC or the Pac-12. Like, and so the Big Ten is like, cool, we'll just stick with 9 conference games.
Yeah, we'll find out here at some point whether or not the Big Ten goes to no divisions or the status quo. We did find out that there's been no discussion about shuffling the divisions around, moving things around. Gene kind of joked about leaders and legends, but it's either we're no divisions or these are divisions we're going to ride with. But, this is my shocked face that the Big Ten, ACC, Pac-12 Super Friends Alliance with no contract signed really amounted to nothing. And, so it'll be interesting to kind of see how that moves forward. The television deal, as we saw a report in the Sports Business Journal that they expect ESPN's exclusive negotiating window to come and go and how that's going to set up. But, for all this talk about the Big Ten potentially moving back to 8 games and doing all this other stuff and going out, as Tony said, to Wazoo or to Wake Forest, that all seems to be a whole lot of nothing. So, kind of take it for what it is. I mean, certainly one of several interesting things that Gene talked about during this press conference. One thing that wasn't really talked about, at least it was asked about, but wasn't talked about, was maybe some sort of a new contract for Ryan Day at this point. We haven't gotten there yet. Is more of, as he said, that they've really been focused on the coaching staff and the support staff and everything else, and that they only just finished that minutes ago, essentially. So, we'll see where that goes. But who would ever think that maybe they're being, maybe a little vague on purpose just for the sake of being vague? I think it might be a little further along than we think. I don't think, even though Ryan Day's contract takes him through 27, that you're just going to let him sit there and ride all that long without rewarding him for everything that the program's become.
Yeah, my thoughts were kind of agree with what these guys said. The Big Ten went to 9 conference games in one respect because it owns the Big Ten network. At least it owns 49% of it, along with Fox owning 51% of it. And when they did that, it created this entire inventory of extra games that had this conference imprint on them that, are worth an extra half point in the ratings just because they're conference games. I mean, Maryland, Minnesota, you say about it whatever you will, it's a Big Ten regular season conference game, means more than Maryland playing Temple or Syracuse or somebody like that, which is kind of a meaningless non-conference game. So that's the first thing. The second thing is under the current way that they do things, if you keep 9 games and Ohio State jumps out of conference and plays Texas or Notre Dame with a 10th game, they then have the liberty to schedule 2, guarantee games to ride out the schedule, and those can be UAB and Tulsa, 2 automatic wins, or Toledo or whoever. And I know somebody says, Toledo's not an automatic win. Well, for Ohio State, it's always been. So that's the thing. And if you have this alliance with 9 games in the conference, then that alliance game has to be the 11th game. And you may have to give up a home game some years to accommodate the alliance home and away. And I just don't see a stomach for that with a lot of the big, like these guys said, if there was some overriding value that came back to the Big Ten from playing a road game at Washington State or a road game at Wake Forest, then you'd say, oh my God, why didn't we think of this 5 years ago? But there's not. Ohio State makes $10 or $12 million playing Toledo at home. They could play Youngstown State. It doesn't matter who they play. They're going to make that $10 million. So they don't need to go to Washington State for that 11th game. Or use them as the redheaded stepchild in this whole alliance thing, just because how do you fly a big plane into Pullman, Washington, it's like going to State College. How do you get there? So any rate, that was my first take on that. Agree with what a lot of the others said. Unfortunately, I could not attend today's press conference and I missed it, but I sent our guys like 6 or 8 questions that I would have asked. First of all, what's the holdup on the playoff from his standpoint? Why isn't it moved forward? What's the Big Ten angling for? Can we get a read on why it's not been enacted yet? The whole super senior thing that we've batted back and forth here the last several weeks, why that was only allowed for 1 season. The guys can take advantage of the super senior year, but they have to fit under the scholarship limit. I'm not sure if he addressed that or not. And I had several other ones, but those were some of the ones I would go for. As far as Ryan Day, I presume they're going to get to that in good time. You look at James Franklin and Mel Tucker now making more money than him. Doesn't make sense. And so Jim Harbaugh was making more money than him. That didn't make sense either. So I think that they need to address that sooner rather than later. And then Chris Holdman's kind of the elephant in the room, the basketball coach. I know we don't talk a lot about basketball here, but he's in the 5th year of a 7-year contract. I think this 5th year of an 8-year contract. So he would come out this year with 3 years left. I think it's time that, if you're going to retain him, that you've got to give him some kind of automatic rollover, or tear that up and give him a 5-year deal or something like that. But, a lot of politics involved there. He's never been to the Sweet 16 or won a Big Ten championship of any kind. So maybe get through this spring and see where he leaves this program after this NCAA. And maybe if they make a run, the timing's right to rip up his contract and and give him something that shows him, hey, we don't want you to go to Louisville. We don't want you to go to Kentucky. We want you to stay here. So I know, again, we don't talk a lot of basketball, but that's certainly on Gene Smith's radar, no doubt.
Yeah, and Gene did say that they'll be talking here shortly because he's very happy with Holdman and the way things are going with the basketball program. The playoff thing, Gene seemed to think like 12 is going to happen. That's basically what he said. He thinks 12 will happen. They just have to come to an agreement on who all knows what. But I think the thing that struck a lot of people then is if you have 12, he mentioned having home games on, home campus games for the playoffs for the first round. And he said that his preference may be, instead of having it at Ohio Stadium, have Ohio State's home game in Indianapolis in the Dome, because he wants CJ Stroud to have, or whoever the quarterback, he said CJ Stroud, but whoever the quarterback is, you want to have ideal conditions. And so his preference would be ideal conditions. Now, this past December, if the playoffs are, if they start 2 weeks after a conference championship week, that would have been like December 18th. The temperature in Columbus on December 18th this past year was 51 degrees. Like, you don't need to schedule a dome game in general that early in December in Ohio, or certainly not in Columbus. But it's so I think a lot of Ohio State fans are upset about that prospect. I wonder what Ryan Day would think. Do you want to play in Indianapolis, or do you want to play in Columbus? And I also wonder if Ryan Day can go against his athletic director in this right now. So I think that's another thing that has created a bit of an uproar right now, is you've got the Ohio State athletic director willing to give up a home game for better conditions in Indianapolis, while also not worrying about the anywhere else in the nation. Like, no, Georgia can still play at their, on campus. Alabama can still play on campus. We would just choose not to. And I know that has a bunch of Buckeye fans upset as well.
Yeah, he was calling it the Hoosier Dome, so maybe it'll only be indoors if it is at the Hoosier Dome, RIP Hoosier Dome, not Lucas Oil. It's certainly, it certainly was an opportunity for him to say, well, no, we just probably need to play these at neutral sites. But no, I mean, we would explore the potential of playing at the Hoosier Dome while Alabama could host at home and Georgia could host at home and so on and so forth. He was asked a second time about it, and it was framed a little bit differently about having the option. And then we got into meteorology about Columbus being south of the snow belt, but Madison, Wisconsin, and Minneapolis, Minnesota are in the snow belt. Well, we don't have to worry. Neither of them are going to the playoff. But I don't know how you would be able to sit there and say, all right, your tickets are in 8C at Ohio Stadium, and your corresponding seats at Lucas Oil, which has a different capacity, would be here. So you can't just sit there and put together a game in a week just because a storm is moving in or whatever. I'm hoping that this was just a lot of stuff that was just, came out of the box incorrectly and is not the direction that they're looking at going for reals.
Well, I think having the option is okay. It's just choosing that option is the issue. And maybe after seeing once Gene has more information about how maybe the team feels about it, how the coach feels about it, maybe he changes his mind.
I just think the whole thing's patently absurd. I think we used to have the state championship games were played at Ohio Stadium in high school football that first weekend of December. Again, I don't know the exact timing they're talking about. And it was cold. I mean, that day Joe Burrow played Toledo Central Catholic at Ohio Stadium. It was 30 degrees. It was cold. I think there's some trepidation on Gene's part about the plumbing at Ohio Stadium. It has to be winterproofed or winterized at some point, and that's why they have never wanted to play, the Winter Classic hockey game at Ohio Stadium, which would be a perfect place to have it. obviously, for the Columbus Blue Jackets, maybe to play, one of those outdoor NHL games. But I just think that this just, in my mind, kind of goes along with the we're here, but just don't ask. We're here for you, but just don't ask for anything type thing. It's like, oh, it'd be too
Insurance.
big a bother for us to host a college football playoff game on 7 days' notice or whatever. And that's kind of the tact Ohio State's taken with the OHSAA. Well, we just don't think, we can do the basketball here anymore or whatever. And we've got CCHA or Big Ten hockey we got to hold it for. And, we're just kind of in a no can do stance on this stuff. And I don't know if it's because he's near the end of his time as the athletic director to where, it gives him a headache to think about putting on more events or whatever, and help's hard to find. I mean, they were having workshops to find red coats to staff the games because of COVID and different things like that. And just staging a game of that magnitude is hard to do. So let somebody else do it is kind of the feeling. But I don't know. I don't agree with it. Not 100%. If you get assigned a home playoff game, it needs to be on your field where you play, barring an act of God. And, I know the game's got to be played for television, et cetera, so on. But I don't know. It's just seems kind of short-sighted. And I don't know how you'd book the Hoosier Dome, which actually, when its last legs was known as the RCA Dome before Lucas Oil Stadium went up. So he's 2 names ago and 1 building ago on his names. But we get what he's talking about. I just don't understand how you'd think you're going to book a building of that magnitude on 6 days' notice and have it on a contingency, I guess, if you're sitting in a position to get a home game in the final 3 weeks, make the phone call, hey, we might be hosting a game on December 10th or whatever. Just too many cats to herd, to get this thing off the ground. And I saw the American commissioner, I think Mike Oresco is his name, sent out an open letter to all the stakeholders. And I didn't read it, but my guess it was, hey, we need to pull our heads out of our butt and come to some consensus on this and quit angling for what's best for our little fiefdom and do what's best for the group, because we're leaving tens and 20 and 30 millions of dollars. I mean, there's legitimately for each school probably $1 million or $2 million a year that's being left out there on the table every year they don't do this. So I don't know. They got to come up with something.
Well, for Gene Smith, he would think, based on his references to Indianapolis in the stadium there, that he was the AD at Maryland or somewhere, that there was just this place that we've heard about but never frequented. And also, Kevin, keep in mind that in 2017, Wisconsin was one Alex Hornibrook touchdown pass away from going to the playoff, so it could happen.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. One quick note on this alliance business. It wasn't my thought. I wasn't convinced by the original proposal and announcement of the thing, but my hope was this was a understated and informal power play against the SEC to say, okay, you're hoarding teams and you're going to build this big conglomerate. So we are banding together to shut you out. We're not going to do it formally, and we'll let the teams that have already contracted with you play out these games possibly, but we're going to build our non-conference schedule around these 3 leagues, and therefore we're not going to have room to play you. We'll see you in the playoff, and you're not going to have anybody to play, especially at that point. The Big 12 was in peril, and it's obviously fortified itself since, but you're not going to have potentially anyone to play in non-conference, so have fun playing Conference USA in the Sun Belt in non-conference play, because we're banding together. I thought that was going to be the power play. I was hoping that was going to be the power play.
Well, and it certainly was a power play against the SEC, and it could also be it against the scheduling, but you're still going to have those ACC teams that always schedule the rival SEC schools, at the end of the year. That's probably never going to go away, because the governors may not allow it of those individual states. But I still think this is a power move against the SEC, and it was one that slowed everything down in terms of the playoff expansion, in my opinion.
Jordan, thank you so much for the super chat contribution there. Easy solution right here. If you have to play games at the shoe in the winter, just ask Lincoln Riley to cook his brisket. There certainly will be enough fire to heat the stadium.
Well, the problem is that brisket is so dry, and during the winter, the air is dry. So it might suck any moisture out of the air to try and put it into that brisket. And it might be even more, you may walk outside and you may just like crack and explode. I mean, I don't want to be anywhere near Lincoln Riley's brisket. As somebody who enjoys the art of cooking a brisket, it just makes me sad and angry whenever I even have to think about that poor piece of meat. Just terrible.
Yeah, but it's a dry cold.
Yeah, you overcook that brisket. It's no fun. It's just it's dry and no fun. I'll say that.
I do think the idea that of Gene Smith being okay with getting rid of divisions, I think that's coming. I think that's probably the next step, and it's not going to be some shuffling of divisions. I think it's just going to be getting rid of them that way, because he also mentioned the fact that athletes can be at Ohio State for 4 years and not play every team in the conference, and he doesn't think that's right. And so this would be another way to make sure that everybody gets to play everybody, because you can shuffle the schedules so easy from year to year so that everybody plays everybody. So I think that's going to happen. I don't know how quickly. Maybe with a new TV deal, maybe that's something that gets baked in, or that does that up the ante, because I think that makes for more interesting television than Ohio State Rutgers every year. Instead, now you'll get more Ohio State Wisconsin, more Ohio State Iowa. Now I understand that that's happening this year anyway, but you'll have more East-West stuff that I think makes for a better product than all of this East-East, West-West stuff.
Yeah, because I go through an annual exercise, which I did a couple days ago, where I'm trying to determine, okay, who lucked out in scheduling and who's getting beaten over the head. And this particular year, we've got Purdue playing 3 teams in the Eastern Division that went 7-20 last year. So that's Maryland, Rutgers, I think they get Penn State, Rutgers, Indiana, of course, 0-9. And then you got teams on the top end that are playing 18-9 composite schedules from the other division. I try to balance that out, try to figure that out, but you're locked into the East and the West, so it's difficult to do. It's even more difficult to do in the SEC. That's another deal with only 2 non-division games. But is that to create, as you say, Tony, more attractive matchups? Is that also to prevent a 4-loss team or 3-loss team winning a conference title, screwing up the playoff for the Big Ten, and possibly getting a second team, i.e. Ohio State this past year, playing a rematch against Michigan? Maybe you fit 2 into the playoff, or whatever the playoff is going to be, 12 instead of getting 3, and you get 4 in, or whatever it's going to be in the future. Just more playoff worthy teams could possibly have that shot to impress.
Yeah, I think all of that factors in, and who knows what happens with conference championship games. I know my prevailing theory has always been like they're not going to take games away, but if the 12-team playoff has to happen, or if conference championship games have to go away to have this 12-team playoff happen, is that something that conferences will be willing to give up? And if so, then you don't really need divisions. If you're looking for the best 2, there's going to be no settling it. So, so that's something I wonder if this is going to be the eventual move, because we have operated forever without conference championship games. Now you would need everybody to agree to that, and I don't know that everybody will. You've got the SEC being against auto bids. I think the Big Ten was in favor of it. Certain conferences are in favor of it. Certain conferences aren't. And there's so much negotiating that still has to happen. And I wonder what are the biggest pieces, and is how big of a piece is conference championship games? How big a piece is this or that? But I think getting rid of divisions and is TV, is the playoff jockeying and for positions, not wanting, because I know the big argument against auto qualifiers is you don't want a 9-4 Minnesota going to the playoffs. And so if you eliminate divisions, then that takes that off the table. So now is the SEC more willing to say, okay, we can accept auto bids on conference champions because it's your conference champion will be one of your two best teams. And so does that make it an easier pill to swallow for the folks who are against auto bids? I think it has to.
Okay. I got you there. So this is, did he determine, or did he communicate that it's been determined that the 8-game idea is out the door? So is that officially dead?
Not officially, but for now, right, Kevin?
Okay.
Yeah, kind of what it kind of sounded like. Yeah.
Okay, but no divisions. I'm good either way. I think the West from top to bottom is just as good as the East, but obviously we're concerned with the top teams and they come from the East. And if you look at it from year to year, who knows what would happen because the schedules would be different. You can't really project or look at previous seasons and determine exactly what would have happened. But about half the time you would have two Eastern teams playing in the Big Ten championship. All right.
Comes down to what you're going to have protected rivals, and then you get inequality in terms of what your protected rivals are going to be. And I get it. If you're sometimes going to have to sit there and go through maybe a little bit of a tougher road. But I just, my concern without having the divisions is you're going to have these protected rivals, and that's not. I mean, Ohio State and Michigan's going to be protected. That's spoiler alert. There's not a scenario where that's not the case, but. I mean, and it's not a case of where you're putting them specifically into pods. So Ohio State, Michigan State, and Penn State are going to be their own little pod. Ohio State could have its 3 protected rivals, be it Michigan, have it be Illinois, because Lord knows we have to play for that damn turtle. But whereas Michigan could have Michigan State, I'm skeptical of how the balance is going to work out with that, because partially it's just math, and math is going to end up catching up with you at some point. And part of it is just that they don't necessarily make great decisions over there.
It's fairly easy to make a kind of a 3-pronged system that number one, you have protected rivals. Number two, then your next objective, I would think, this is at least what I would like, is that the schedules are as fair as possible, that you're playing as close to a 500 composite schedule as possible from the previous season. And then at number 3, you're obviously looking at situations in which, okay, we just built this schedule, but Ohio State hasn't played Minnesota in 7 years, and they're playing Iowa 3 consecutive years. So let's shake that up a little bit.
But would they put schedules out yearly, every 2 years, every 4 years? I mean, are you going to sit there? I mean, how far out are you going to go? I mean, the Big Ten used to be a little bit more aggressive than other conferences in terms of how far out it would put its schedules. But, I don't know if I like the idea of a yearly churn. Maybe you put them out 2 years at a time or something like that. But again, because if you're looking to sit there and be as close to net 500 as possible, I mean, you're going to have to pretty much go through this quite frequently.
You go through it every offseason. You build your schedule in the offseason and you base it on the previous year's standings. That's what I would do.
You're changing them yearly. So you don't know who you're playing next year at any point until it drops. You don't know what you're not going to have 2 years in front of you.
No.
To be able to recruit with that, to be able to do whatever with. I don't like it.
How far out is the SEC? Aren't they annual every?
I thought aren't they 2 years? Maybe they're year. I don't like the idea of yearly. I like knowing what's going on. I think fans would like the idea of knowing, hey, I know I'm going to the Wisconsin game in 22, hypothetically, and I'm going to the Penn State game in 23. And I know that when you get to 23, maybe 24 hasn't dropped yet at that point, but you're in the back end of a 2-year cycle.
But you can't book anything. So what's the problem, Kevin? I know you like to plan, but you can't book 2 years out.
I already have all of our hotels booked for this year.
The SEC's got an automatic rotation. So you got your hotel booked for when?
No, I got I book my hotels at the beginning of the year.
Okay. I just don't see what the problem is. Every other sport produces a schedule during the off season. The NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and they're much more complicated, and they can produce it during the off season. I don't think that it's so difficult. And number two, I want scheduling equity. I don't want imbalanced schedules where you can look at one team's schedule and say that's a lot tougher than this team's schedule. And of course, you can't predict the future, so you don't know how good the teams are going to be. But I think you can also bring in a committee element to the metrics. So you start with the metrics, but then you can determine, okay, Indiana went 0-9 last year. They're not going to go 0-9 this year. Maybe we can project them to be about a 2-win team at least in the Big Ten. So if there's some math that breaks a certain way, you can use a little logic and projection to apply to it as well. That's the way I would do it. I don't think the SEC, it pretty much schedules itself. They play their division. They play the one rival in the other division. Then the other game rotates.
Yeah, that schedules itself. We know that Alabama and Georgia won't play each other during the regular season. We already know that. And taking this back to baseball, I don't care how many times the Dodgers play the Brewers versus playing the Mets. I mean, you have 162 games when it's not locked out or whatever. I mean, very different argument, very different beast there between a professional league and a college league, where every team in there, every team is supposed to be a rival more so than. Again, I don't care about that midweek Yankees Devil Rays series or Rays or whatever. I just see it as very different things, and I think it's too great of a departure of where we've been before.
Okay. Sue had asked in the live chat if Gene Smith was asked at all about National Signing Day date.
No. No, there are no plans to change any of that at this point. And Ryan Day said he doesn't want it to change right now because there's already so much change going on. Let's just, if stuff can stay the way it is right now, let's keep it the way it is and then let everything else settle around it and then figure it out.
The devil you know versus the devil you don't.
All right, talking Buckeyes every Wednesday with all of you here at the Voice of College Football. We got the three best that I can find, and they're here every week. We got Tony Gerdeman and Kevin Noon from Buckeye Scoop, unless you got replacements. Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts 247 Sports. So we'll start with Kevin to see what you're up to and where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Noon. Obviously, you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com. You can find my podcast on YouTube and all the podcasting channels at Big Me Kickoff. I will be in Findlay, Ohio tomorrow for the Luke Montgomery announcement. So keep an eye on all of my streams of social media for all of that big news, big lineman that Ohio State looks to be in good shape for landing, and expect plenty of content to come out of that.
Tony?
Yeah, you can find me at BuckeyeScoop.com. Just I've got a bunch of bullet points of what Gene Smith had to say today. So if you want the brief edition of his hour-long session, you can go check that out. You can also find me on Twitter at Tony Gerdeman. And then we just dropped we will be dropping an edition of the Buckeye Weekly podcast today, recapping our thoughts on some of the major points that Gene Smith had to say, and the playoff playing the playoff game in Indianapolis, the maybe possible losing of divisions, and then the RIP, the Alliance. So we talk about that in today's episode.
Steve?
Not a whole heck of a lot going on. Just, I don't know, trying to get through mid-February here, thinking about spring football coming up in less than a month. And as Kevin said, got the Montgomery decision coming out tomorrow, and I think it's going to be webcast on CBS Sports HQ at whatever time, noon maybe tomorrow. Is that it, Kevin?
3 o'clock. Yeah, 3 Eastern.
Okay. Yep. So I'll be dialed in for that, I presume. And my feeling is it'd be a major upset if it's not Ohio State. But I mean, I'm not preempting his announcement by any means, but I think that's what most everybody thinks is what's going to happen, or maybe you guys have a different read on it. But he'd be a great get, and obviously his younger brother is an outstanding quarterback 2 years behind him. As a freshman this year, so and Ohio State I think is already involved with him. So get on the ground floor with the Montgomerys from Findlay, Ohio. That's how I look at it. So should be a big event tomorrow and on all the sites to see what happens.
Maybe I'll go have lunch over at Steve's Dakota Grill, where we've eaten before on our way up to that state up north.
Or Beer Barrel Pizza. There's a Beer
Barrel Pizza. There's a Frickers. There's a
Frickers.
Yes.
There's a Frickers. Yes.
Better than being stuck in Delaware at 5 p.m. trying to come down 23.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've already talked to my wife about that. I said, don't expect me to be racing back because there's only one way back and it's horrible. So
yeah.
My son tells me that Eli Apple trends all the time for his miscues in the secondary. Do we feel bad for old Eli after Super Bowl Sunday?
Heavens no. And here's why. He's made it 6 years in the NFL, made many, many millions of dollars. He could buy and sell me and my family and my descendants for 20 times over. And let's just say this. I mean, people are going to replay that touchdown until the end of time, the last one, and he was the guy guarding him. But, that guy Cup made everybody look bad this year. I don't think it was he's alone in that fraternity. So tough play, for him, the last play. But, the penalty he had, that was an obvious penalty and the right thing for him to do. He was beaten. He grabbed the guy, and that was it. So, he's a whipping boy for everybody, but he made it a lot farther than I ever did as a National Football League defensive back. So, is he the best in the league? No, probably not. But he's one of the reasons they made it as far as they did, because he did have probably one of his best seasons as a pro. And I was just talking to a guy at lunch about this. I'm a Browns person, but I have Bengals people in the family, so I was rooting for the Bengals. I was swearing when things didn't go well for the Bengals, and I was right alongside of them, slugging it out to the bitter end. And, I just kind of look at it, and people get wrapped up in the calls at the end of the game, deciding the game. And the fact of the matter is, I think everybody saw on Twitter that somebody rated the pass protection efficiency rate of the Bengals in that game was 14%. That means it wasn't mean that he got sacked 86% of the time. It meant that he only had a clean pocket about 14% of the time. And it was the worst in any NFL game the entire season. You're not going to beat the Jaguars playing, with a 14% pass efficiency rate. So I think we can put the culpability for whatever happened in that game where it belongs. And that's back on the front office with the Bengals, with that offensive line that they saddled that team with, and that the Bengals won in spite of throughout the course of the season. As I joked at one point, I think they game plan knowing they're going to have 50 yards of negative plays built in there. So they're throwing downfield because they know it's 2nd and 22, quite a bit. So to me, I think that's where the blame lies. And I would fully expect them to go get 2 free agent offensive linemen who can play, and maybe take a blue chipper in the first round and maybe another in the third round, something like that can come right in and start along that offensive line. And whether that means Isaiah Prince is out of a job or not, I don't know. But, he didn't distinguish himself very well, I don't think, in the Super Bowl either. So it was a rough day. But no, Eli Apple, everybody's favorite whipping boy, and he's out there wears his emotions on his sleeves, and lets everybody know what he's thinking. And of course, his mom Annie, she doesn't necessarily help his cause a lot of the time either. But not a popular guy. There was a thing leading up to the Super Bowl. NJ.com PM'd her and said, "Can you get us in touch with Eli, or we want to do a story with you, leading up to the Super Bowl?" And she told him to go get bent basically on Twitter, and I have to believe because they flamed him so hard, how he was a bust with the Jets, just 3 or 4 years ago or whatever, that they'll have nothing ever to do again with the hometown newspaper because he's from New Jersey, so they wanted to do the feel-good hometown guy makes the Super Bowl story, forgetting the fact that their news outlet probably raked him over the coals time and again for his play with the Jets. But that's my Eli Apple and Bengals Super Bowl remembrances right there.
I'll just say I would feel bad for him if he didn't, like, he's his own worst enemy on social media, because he goes after people, and not just random people. He goes after like Tyreek Hill and all of the receivers that they beat, and it's you at some point this is all going to come crashing down on you. Karma's going to catch up with you in terms of, like, he is playing the villain very, very well, but eventually the villain loses, and that happened here. And you see like Michael Thomas even having a good time with it on Twitter. And I just, there are a lot of people who enjoyed his struggle, and I can understand him being bitter towards a lot of people on social media, because I don't know how many people hear it worse than he does on social media. And so then he tends to enjoy the good times on social media. But when you do that, you're obviously going to be, you better be ready when the bad times happen again. And if you're a cornerback, they eventually will.
Yeah, not much I can add here at this point. I think Steve and Tony have kind of hit all the points I was going to make.
Sue's back with a question on the 2023 quarterback class and who might be trending to come to Columbus. Kevin?
If Sue knows, please let me know. Send me a message that nobody's trending at this point. I don't know if I would sit there and say that there's a name that's ahead. I mean, I can tell you some names it's not going to be. It's not going to be Arch Manning. It's not going to be Malachi Nelson. But, there certainly are some names out there of guys. I haven't really fully been able to get my arms around all the 23 names at this point. There's some 24s out there that I seemingly think are 23s, and they're 24s. There's Dylan Longerin is somebody that I would keep an eye on. I think that they really like him. He's somebody who's supposed to be taking a round of visits coming up here pretty soon. But no, I think it's, I feel more comfortable in telling you who I think is going to be their 25 quarterback, who I'll see in Findlay, Ohio on tomorrow. But I'm not so sure about 23 at this point. So the Magic 8 Ball says, ask me again later.
Well, I think it's interesting because 2022, obviously they got Devin Brown. 2024, they're really looking hard at what Jaden Davis out of North Carolina. He's the number one quarterback in the class. So, and I'm not sure how great they feel. I know at one point everybody felt pretty good. So you've got this sandwich of 2023. Do you swing for the fences, or do you settle for somebody knowing that you've got somebody you feel very good about in Devin Brown in 2022 and somebody that you feel really good about in 2024? 2023 may just be more, obviously you're going to get the best possible guy, but do you, how do you attack it? And there are guys certainly that they're looking at, but how patient are you? Do you, if you go and get the top guy, does that hurt you with the 2024 kid that you're looking at? And so you almost have to, like, what shot exactly are you going to shoot? And are you more concerned about 2024 than 2023? Because I kind of would be, given Devin Brown and Kyle McCord in the fold right now.
Yeah, my feeling is you've got Devin Brown and you've got Kyle McCord who are going to battle for that starting position in 2023. And they do have offers out there. As he mentioned, Dylan Lonergan from Georgia, national top 100 player. Nicholas Iamaleava from California. He's a national top 10 prospect. I believe he was at their
camp at Ohio State last year. Yeah.
And so did Dante Moore from Martin Luther King High School in Detroit, Michigan. They were both at Ohio State's camp before, what would that have been, their sophomore year. They're sophomores right now. That's right, isn't it? So 2023, no, they would be juniors. So that's big. If they can get those guys back on campus this spring, maybe for the spring game or something, that would be big. That's what I would look for. But to be honest with you guys, what I fully expect to happen is Stroud goes to the NFL, and then you have two guys with barely any playing experience in line to battle for this position. I think they go off the board and go find somebody, a mercenary, a Jack Cohn, not Jack Cohn, somebody out there, that type of a transfer that maybe has some playing experience somewhere else, somebody who has been affiliated per se with a Ryan Day affiliated coach somewhere that comes with a strong recommendation, needs a change of scenery, and can come in and compete for the starting job in next spring, because that just seems to make more sense to me than going in to spring football with two guys who barely have any playing time under their belt, because Stroud took all the meaningful snaps again for a second year in a row. I just kind of, it's kind of in the back of my head that, it'd be great to get a top 2023 prospect. I think, they're going to do everything they can to do that. But I think in the bigger picture, Ryan Day's got to be like, no, I need somebody who can play and somebody who can compete with these guys and push these guys to be the best they can be. Now, one of them may be the guy, Brown or McCord, but I don't think anybody really knows that as of today. So that wouldn't surprise me at all if they're able to go out and find an immediate transfer who's got a year or two of eligibility left that come in and shake things up.
See, I would be surprised if they went that route. I think you go and you get somebody like a Gunnar Hoke or somebody who gives you who has some experience or whatever, but I think you hurt yourself recruiting if you sit there and you have Kyle McCord who sticks through these years, and you have Devin Brown who ended up in one of the services, not your service, not the one I used to work for, ended up being the number 1 overall recruit. Nobody really knew what Ohio State had in C.J. Stroud necessarily. I think what they need to do is they need to make more of an effort to get some experience to these younger guys this year, especially if the offense is going to be still as potent as we think it is and the defense is going to take a step in the right direction. I don't think you would end up going into the 23 season with quarterbacks who have 0 pass attempts in the collegiate game. But I think that if you do bypass the product of your recruiting, you're stunting your future recruiting because you're bypassing it because you don't necessarily have faith. If you go out and get we all heard the rumors of Malik Willis being somebody that they looked at some point. If you go out and get somebody of that stature, I think it hurts you long term. I think it's something that unless it completely works, which, I'm not necessarily going to bet against Ryan Day a bunch in terms of quarterback development, but I would say that's a cautionary tale.
I think if they go that route, that tells you how they feel about Kyle McCord and Devin Brown after seeing more of them. And if Kyle McCord, I expect him to play quite a bit this year. I think there'll be enough blowouts for that to happen. And the defense will be good enough to allow that to happen. So I think they're going to get a good look at Kyle McCord. And I think if they then brought somebody in, he would be one of the first guys out. Like you're telling him right now that you can't play here. If you bring in somebody as a starter, you would have to be very, very clear to him that you are going to have every opportunity to start, or you are our starter. We're bringing in somebody for insurance then. And still that's, I would probably side in the middle. Don't necessarily bring in the Pitt quarterback this past year. Like don't go for that guy, Kenny Pickett. Maybe somebody lower that wouldn't necessarily be a threat, but could step in if you need. Because I still think you have to be concerned about angering the guy that is supposed to be the guy, and Kyle McCord or Devin Brown. But it's dangerous. And if it happens, I think it's because they don't feel great about who they have. And that would be a kind of a change on where they think they are right now, but they'll see more of them and figure it out for sure.
Ty Kroner, we appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for the contribution. Any Dewanda Jones type of players right now rank low to Ohio State standards, but who could really develop into something promising?
Well, Dewanda Jones was he was outside of the top 1,000 of the 24/7 composite. So Ohio State doesn't have many of those guys anymore. Like Trey LaRue, I don't think he's going to become that. The lowest ranked position player in the 2021 class was 416. The lowest ranked position player in this past class was Avery Henry at 705. So we kind of have to adjust. Like, what is the top 1,000 under Ryan Day? Is that in the top 500? Is that outside the 500? I think in terms of guys that maybe are lower ranked and still 4-star would be Kai Stokes, the safety this year. Everybody really seems to love him. Everybody that sees him in person loves him. Everybody that talks to him loves him. I don't know. He's a safety. Was talked about as possibly playing corner under Kerry Combs, but looks like he'll stay at safety now. They have question marks at safety. I don't know that any of those questions are going to be answered by a true freshman this year, but he's he's towards the back end of this class. So I guess that's maybe Dewanda Jones territory as a guy to look out for. Maybe not necessarily this year, but down the road for me.
I think Kevin Wilson talked about Sam Hart, I believe, when he was at the Rose Bowl. And he was ranked in the 300s, I think, in the 2021 class. I think he'd be one to kind of keep an eye out because that tight end job's wide open. We don't know what's going to happen with G. Scott. Is he going to stick around? Is he going to make a run at that job? I mean, what's been the disconnect kind of with him? He moved from wide receiver to tight end and just has never gotten on the field. So makes you wonder, what the feeling is there with him. That's an important job. And if Cade Stover's not going to do it, then, somebody needs to. Looking back, Ty Hamilton was a guy in the 700s from the 2020 class. He's shown some things at times. Mayan Williams was in the 600s, and he's already done some great things. So Joe Royer was in the 400s as well, a tight end. I think they talked about him. So they've got some down-the-line guys who are going to factor on this team this year. And I think, nobody ever gives you credit on signing day when you sign a guy outside the top 300 or anything. It's just kind of like, oh, those were the throw-ins, or whatever. But, the way Ohio State develops talent, there's a lot of guys who are ranked low on signing day who end up being better stars and better performers, bigger contributors than a lot of the national top 100 guys. I mean, Denzel Burke, I think, was 168 or 175, and he showed up ready to play in preseason camp and won the starting job and never came out of the lineup and was arguably one of their top 2 or 3 defensive players, all season long. So I guess I've never gotten too wrapped up in the recruiting rankings. I just feel like how do you measure the heart of somebody? And just going to Ohio State as a student, my whole feeling on the whole thing after my 4 years was over was this wasn't necessarily about how much you learned. It was about how much crap you could put up with and overcome, kind of like you were in the military, hurry up and wait was kind of the the motto for a lot of things at Ohio State. So, that's kind of how it is for these guys who have the tediousness of getting up every 3-4 days a week at 6 a.m. to go work out. I mean, it's a full-time job, and who wants to do it? And that's something you can't measure just off of junior football tape. So, that's my feeling on that is that a lot of times those guys further down the list want it a little bit more than the guys at the top of the list who've been told, oh, yeah, you'll be in the NFL one day, no question.
Just to jump, Ty had mentioned he was talking more about upcoming recruits. Ohio State isn't recruiting kids in the 1,000s right now at this point. So there's no way necessarily to gauge that because there's this amount of kids that are recruited and then everybody else is wide open at this point. Sometimes those guys that are 700, 800, 1,000 on the list, recruiting services, say what you will about whether you agree with them or disagree with them. I think each year they get a little bit better and a little bit better. And I don't think that there is many hidden gems. which brings me off to another rant that I'll make very quickly so I don't drag this down with that. But I don't think there's a reason for them to be necessarily looking at guys that are projects right now. You look at projects because you miss in other places. My rant is everybody talking about Cooper Kupp being a 0-star. That's a load of crap. He was just not assigned stars, and recruiting services don't go through and backfill guys at that point. I've worked for a recruiting service for years and years and years, and if you went to an FBS program, maybe they threw 2 stars on you just so, oh, well, we look smart. At least we rated you. Kid went to an FCS school. They didn't backfill any stars on there. It wasn't because they thought that the kid was a 0-star talent and that he wasn't worth a darn. It's because they just never rated him. So all this talk about the kid being a 0-star is a load of hooey.
And I'll add one thing more on Dewanda Jones. He committed on signing day. Like, he had an official visit in January, so they knew about him at this point, but they weren't trying all that hard to get at him. Like, that guy is down the road. You're not worried about him right now. You may keep in touch just in case. You send a text saying, hey, keep working. We're watching. And then when you figure out, well, crap, now we're in a world of hurt, we need to find a tackle, then you go, well, let's see what Dejuan Jones is doing. That's how that process goes right now.
Sue brings up A.J. Harris for good reason. He's the 3rd-rated cornerback in the country out of the state of Alabama, and she's noticed that he's been having a love fest with Kerry Combs on Twitter right now. Is he in the mix?
He's in the mix. They need to get him on campus. They need to get him in front of Eliano and Walton and kind of go from there. Ohio State's still Ohio State. Obviously, you make relationships with coaches, and he's got a great relationship with Kerry Combs, and with Combs being at Cincinnati. Cincinnati jumps in as a group of 5 type of team that suddenly is in on a kid that is legitimate top of his class type of kid. But it's going to be so important for Ohio State to get Harris back on campus to really work on that relationship between Eliano and Walton and the Harris family. And I still think Ohio State's very much a player in this.
6'1", 180, top 20 player in the country.
He posted something about, and I was trying to find it where it was about, always being family with Kerry Combs or something like that. And basically, like, even if I don't end up playing with you or playing for you, like, there is some sort of caveat there that, like, he's already envisioning himself not going to Cincinnati. Like, even though I'm going to be going somewhere else, I'll always value our relationship, coach. And I just want to let you know that. So I will believe Cincinnati when I see it. Now, you look at what they did in the draft, they're gonna be pushing him because you just had the Thorpe Award winner. You're going to have a first round corner in this draft, maybe 2. That's going to be a lot of there's enticement there. You've got the coach that you want. They're showing you Cincinnati can put guys in the NFL. So we'll see if that's enough. I don't think it will be, but look at what's happening with other small schools around the nation right now. Not that Cincinnati is necessarily a small school, but they're smaller.
Well, you think about Cincinnati, they've got the stability now too, because they just gave the coach extension $5 million a year. He's going to be paid Power 5 money. And of course, that program, I think in 2023, if I'm correct, does that sound right? That's the year that they're going to make the jump to the Big 12. So
I think it depends on when the other 2 leave. I mean, I think that everything's contingent upon when Texas and Oklahoma move. And I don't know if we know a firm on date for them yet.
They're still contractually obligated to the Big 12 until 2025, till after the 2025 season, but we'll see if that holds.
Yeah. So Cincinnati has the stability there that now obviously they didn't have it with Eliano. Ohio State went down and plucked him. It was a straight up 1-for-1. Kerry Combs for Perry Eliano. Not necessarily a straight up 1-on-1, but Perry Eliano for Kerry Combs and future considerations or whatever. But I think that's going to weigh in some recruits' mind that, you're going to be playing at a high level and you're going to have the stability of knowing your coaches are going to be there. Because Fickle seems dead set on staying there. I think the only job that he would leave there for now is Ohio State. So if it ever comes open, which doesn't seem like that's going to happen anytime soon based on the comments from Gene Smith today that Ryan Day and his wife and they love Columbus, and Ryan Day said his kids love Columbus, and that he may go on to another job, but he'd go on without them because they're going to stay in Columbus. I thought that was a pretty poignant comment to make, that his family has fallen in love with Columbus. Only been here 5 years total, so interesting to see. But at any rate, I look at it that I got questions in my chat this week about secondary recruiting and linebacker recruiting, and I'm just not overly concerned about it. I think they have recruited extremely well in those two areas the last year or two, and they've got depth in both positions. I mean, they could use another blue chip linebacker probably in the upcoming class, but it kind of depends, where do you slot Sonny Styles? Is he an outside linebacker? Is he that hybrid safety linebacker? Is he strictly a safety? They need to get him in June and work him through and figure him out where he's going to fit in. But I think they're going to be just fine, at both those positions. I mean, how can a kid who wants to play in the National Football League, who's a cornerback, not want to play for Tim Walton, who has coached the last 7 years in the National Football League? To me, that just seems like a tailor-made double play ball right there. But, and he's such a good guy to talk to as well. I think back recruiting again after almost a decade of not having to do it, he's going to, take right back to it. But I don't think there's going to be a problem with defensive back or linebacker recruiting.
These guys give us an hour plus each and every week. We hope you appreciate it. Track Steve on Twitter at Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts247 Sports. The same with Kevin. It's easy to find. Kevin_Noon. Tony Gerdeman. Bam. There it is. They make it easy to find them on Twitter. And once again, guys, your podcasts, Tony.
The Buckeye Weekly podcast, several times a week. Find it at any of your local platforms.
Kevin.
Yeah, I do the Big Me Kickoff, which sometimes is twice a week, sometimes once a week, but at least once a week. And you can find it generally rated higher than Tony's podcast.
We have the Bucknuts Morning Five. It was interesting. We had a recent confab with our 24/7 sports people, and they told us it gets more hits than Gary Parrish from CBS, who we're affiliated. Obviously, CBS owns our network 24/7. He does a national college basketball podcast. They found it curious that Ohio State, one of their team sites, gets a bigger following with their daily podcast than Gary Parrish on college basketball. But what can we say? It's Ohio State. It's not necessarily the magic of anything any one of us are doing. It's the pull that all the people out there in radio and TV land have to follow this scarlet and gray juggernaut that just keeps churning down the field year after year after year. So it's done pretty good by me so far. So I think I'll probably stick with it for a while.
For a while. Yeah, it's been a while, no doubt. Appreciate all you guys being here. As always, we've done this 145 weeks in a row, folks. So again, show some love. Follow them on their podcast on Twitter. And of course, Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App right here. MarkRogersTV. And just note that it's for the Buckeyes show and the Buckeyes channel right here at the Voice of College Football. We'll be back here next Wednesday at 1:30 Eastern time, unless we got to have a schedule change. And that's why you subscribe, hit the bell for the notifications to know when we go live. All right, guys. Appreciate you being here. See you next week.
All right. Take care.